Ever wondered if your pet turtle could get a Canadian passport? Probably not. But what about something a little less shelled, a little more Newtonian? Specifically, the unit of force, the Newton. Is it allowed in Canada? That's the question we're tackling today. It sounds a bit absurd, right? A unit of measurement needing permission to cross a border? But stick with me, because there's more to this than meets the eye. It touches on how we measure things, the systems we use, and even a bit of international relations. So, buckle up, because we're about to dive into the surprisingly fascinating world of units of measurement and their global travels. First, let's establish what a Newton actually is. Simply put, it's the standard unit of force in the International System of Units, or the SI system. Think of force as a push or a pull. A Newton is the amount of force required to accelerate a 1 kilogram mass at a rate of 1 meter per second squared. So, if you're pushing a shopping cart, the force you're applying is measured in newtons. It's a fundamental unit, used in everything from engineering and physics to everyday life. Now, Canada, like most of the world, officially uses the metric system, which is based on the SI units. So, technically, the Newton is used in Canada. It's the standard unit for measuring force in scientific research, engineering, and even product labeling. You'll find it in textbooks, on scales, and in technical specifications. So, in that sense, the Newton is not only allowed in Canada, it's actively used and essential. But here's where things get a little more nuanced. While the Newton is the official SI unit for force, and therefore should be the primary unit used in Canada, you might encounter other units, particularly in everyday contexts. One example is the kilogram force, sometimes called the kilopond. This isn't an SI unit, but it's still sometimes used, especially when dealing with weights. The kilogram force is the force exerted by gravity on a mass of 1 kilogram. It's roughly equal to 9.8 newtons. The reason for this lingering use of non-SI units is a mix of historical inertia, practical considerations, and plain old habit. Think about it. How often do you hear someone say, "I weigh 700 newtons"? Probably not very often. We're used to talking about weight in kilograms, even though kilograms are technically a measure of mass, not force. Our scales measure mass, and then our brains convert it to a weight based on the average gravitational pull. This brings us to another interesting point, the difference between mass and weight. Mass is the amount of matter in an object, while weight is the force of gravity on that mass. Your mass stays the same regardless of where you are, but your weight changes depending on the gravitational field. So, your mass on the moon would be the same as on Earth, but your weight would be much less because the moon's gravity is weaker. In everyday life, we often use the terms mass and weight interchangeably, which can be confusing. And this confusion is further compounded by the continued, albeit unofficial, use of units like the kilogram force. So, while the Newton is the officially sanctioned unit for force in Canada, the kilogram force, and even just kilograms for weight, which is technically incorrect, are still encountered. This isn't unique to Canada. Even in countries that have officially adopted the metric system, older units sometimes persist in everyday usage. Another factor to consider is the influence of other countries, particularly the United States, which still primarily uses the imperial system. Because of close economic and cultural ties, Canadians are often exposed to imperial units like pounds and ounces, especially in areas like trade and commerce. While these units aren't officially used in Canada, they're still understood by many Canadians, and you might see them on product packaging or in informal conversations. This can lead to a mix of units, where you might see newtons used in a scientific context, kilogram force in a practical context, and pounds and ounces in a commercial context. So, is the Newton allowed in Canada? The short answer is a resounding yes. It's the official SI unit for force, and it's used in science, engineering, and many other fields. However, the reality is a little more complex. Due to historical reasons, practical considerations, and the influence of other countries, other units, particularly the kilogram force and even just kilograms for weight, are still encountered in everyday life. This doesn't mean the Newton is banned or anything like that. It simply reflects the fact that language and measurement systems evolve over time, and sometimes older habits die hard. It's a bit like how we still say dial the number on a mobile phone, even though there's no dial. The situation is further complicated by the fact that many Canadians are familiar with the imperial system due to its prevalence in the United States. This can lead to a sort of code switching, where people use different units depending on the context. You might use newtons in a physics class, kilogram force when discussing your weight, and pounds when talking about the weight of a shipment from the US. Ultimately, the use of units is a matter of communication. The most important thing is to be clear and unambiguous, especially in technical or scientific contexts. While the official stance is that the Newton is the standard unit of force in Canada, understanding the nuances of how different units are used in different situations is essential for effective communication. It's a reflection of the interconnectedness of our world, where different systems and traditions coexist and sometimes even clash. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.